by Orsin Forfar. Opening balance. The stapler sat 3 centimeters from the monitor's left edge. Hanna Wren measured twice, adjusted once, and felt the day's first spark of satisfaction. Cubicle 47 maintained its perfect geometry. Pens ascending by color temperature, files sorted by claim severity, keyboard keys wiped clean of fingerprints that might suggest chaos lived here. 7:43 a.m. The Meridian Insurance tower hummed its fluorescent hymn, and Hanna opened her first case file of the morning. Claimant, Derek Mullins. Vehicle total loss, A40 slip road. Third claim in 18 months. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with metronomic precision.
3 accidents suggested either extraordinary misfortune or deliberate design. Mathematics rarely lied about human behavior. The photographs told their story in high resolution. Twisted metal, deployed airbags, strategically positioned damage. But the timestamps caught her attention. Each incident occurred within 48 hours of a premium payment deadline.
Coincidence had probability thresholds, and Derek Mullins had exceeded them. Morning, Hanna. Liam Patel's voice carried that particular warmth that made her shoulders tense. He'd arrived 3 weeks ago, full of questions about denied claims and corporate responsibility. His desk neighbored hers, close enough that she could smell his coffee. Too much milk, insufficient sugar for optimal alertness.
Busy night, you're in early again? Standard schedule. The files don't review themselves. She didn't mention the 2 hours she'd spent at her kitchen table, updating her private ledger. Derek Mullins had earned his entry last Tuesday, a red ink notation that balanced against his fraudulent gains. Justice maintained its own accounting system, and Hanna kept meticulous books. Liam leaned against her cubicle partition, disrupting the morning's rhythm. I've been looking at the Henderson file, genuine accident, legitimate medical bills, but we're denying based on a pre-existing condition clause. Feels wrong.
Wrong was a subjective assessment. Policy terms were objective. The distinction mattered.
The clause exists for actuarial reasons. Remove it, and premium costs increase across the entire customer base. But this woman has cancer. The accident wasn't related to her condition. Hanna's fingers paused above the keyboard. She'd read the Henderson file yesterday. A single mother, minimum wage job, medical bills that would destroy her financially. The mathematics were clear, but mathematics operated in service of larger systems.
Sometimes individual tragedies served collective stability.
The policy language is unambiguous. Liam's expression shifted, disappointment replacing his usual optimism. He returned to his desk without further comment, and Hanna felt a brief, unwelcome flutter of something she couldn't categorize. Relief? Regret? Emotions required too much processing power.
Her screen chimed softly. A new system notification appeared in the corner. Aegis Integrity Audit v2.0 had activated across all departments. The message was brief. Enhanced correlation analysis now monitoring workflow patterns, access logs, and productivity metrics. Anomalies will be flagged for management review. Aegis represented the next evolution in corporate oversight. Artificial intelligence designed to detect fraud, waste, and abuse. Hanna appreciated the concept. Order required constant vigilance, and human supervisors missed subtle patterns that machines could identify. She minimized the notification and returned to Derek Mullins. His claim would be denied, of course. The evidence supported rejection, and policy terms provided legal cover. But Derek Mullins had already received his more permanent audit. Last Tuesday evening, she'd followed him from the Weatherspoons on Uxbridge Road. 3 pints, 2 phone calls arranging another accident, then a stumbling walk to his council flat. She'd waited until he'd passed out on his sofa, then administered a precise dose of insulin through his neck. Diabetic coma looked natural enough, and Derek's medical history supported the conclusion. The ledger balanced. Fraudulent gains, £47,000. Final settlement, permanent. Justice served with clinical efficiency. Her phone buzzed against her desk. A text from an unknown number. Know what you did. Meet tonight or everyone finds out. Hanna read the message twice, then deleted it. Blackmail attempts occurred regularly in her line of work. Disgruntled claimants, opportunistic criminals, desperate people seeking leverage. This one felt different, though. More specific, more informed. She opened her desk drawer and retrieved a small bottle of hand sanitizer. 3 pumps into her palm, methodical coverage across fingers and wrists, then careful attention to the spaces between digits. Cleanliness prevented contamination, and contamination led to chaos.
Team meeting in conference room B, 5 minutes. Annika Shah's voice carried across the Cubicle farm with practiced authority. Department meetings usually focused on productivity metrics and regulatory updates. Hanna gathered her notepad and pen, ensuring both were aligned parallel to her keyboard before standing.
The conference room smelled of recycled air and industrial carpet. Annika stood at the head of the table, her expression suggesting serious business.
Aegis V2 represents a significant upgrade to our monitoring capabilities. The system will track everything: login times, file access patterns, even mouse movement analytics. Liam shifted in his chair. Seems a bit invasive. It's comprehensive. The insurance industry loses billions annually to fraud, internal and external. Aegis helps us identify anomalies before they become problems.
Hanna made notes with mechanical precision, but her mind processed implications. Enhanced monitoring meant detailed digital footprints. Her work patterns were deliberately consistent, designed to avoid attention. But Aegis might detect subtleties that human supervisors missed. The meeting concluded with standard warnings about productivity expectations and compliance requirements. Hanna returned to Cubicle 47, aligned her notepad with military precision, and opened Derek Mullen's file for final processing. Another text appeared: diabetic coma, very clever, still meeting tonight.
Someone had connected Derek Mullen's death to her professional access. The timing suggested surveillance, either digital or physical. Both represented problems requiring immediate attention.
Hanna deleted the message and returned to her keyboard. The day's work demanded completion, but tonight's ledger would require a new entry. Balance was a numbers game, and someone had miscalculated their position in her equation. Chapter 2. The Liam joins. Small kindness unsettles Hanna. Aegis posts first subtle discrepancy that could triangulate her nights. The replacement arrived at 9:47 a.m., 17 minutes after the official start time. Hanna noted the delay in her mental log as the new analyst approached the desk adjacent to Cubicle 47. His movements lacked the practiced efficiency of seasoned compliance staff. Too much looking around, too much adjustment of chair height and monitor angles.
Liam Patel, just transferred from the Birmingham office. He extended his hand across the low partition. Hanna regarded it for precisely 2 seconds before accepting the gesture. His palm was warm, slightly damp from nerves. She released contact after the socially acceptable duration. Hanna Wren, Cubicle 47. Right, well, I'm apparently Cubicle 46 now. Guess we're neighbors.
Unnecessary conversation. Work began at 9:30, and social pleasantries consumed productive minutes. She returned to her screen, where Derek Mullen's file awaited final processing. The death certificate had been filed yesterday evening. Diabetic coma as expected. Natural causes, no investigation required. Liam's typing pattern was erratic, frequent pauses interrupting the steady rhythm that characterized experienced analysts. Hanna found herself monitoring his productivity metrics through peripheral awareness. New employees typically process 12 cases daily during their first week. Liam was averaging 8. At 11:15, he placed a cup of tea beside her keyboard. Earl Grey, proper temperature, no spillage on her desk surface.
Thought you might need a break. The canteen tea's actually decent here.
Unsolicited kindness served no obvious purpose in a compliance department. Colleagues maintained professional boundaries, shared necessary information, avoided personal entanglements. Yet Liam's gesture felt genuine rather than manipulative.
Thank you. She sipped the tea while reviewing a motor insurance claim. The claimant, Sarah Hendricks, reported £8,000 in damages after a rear-end collision. Medical reports documented whiplash, physiotherapy requirements, ongoing pain management. Standard soft tissue injury claim, difficult to verify or disprove. That's the third Hendricks file I've seen today. Different first names, but same surname, same postcode area. Hanna minimized her screen. Coincidence. Hendricks is a common surname in South London. Maybe, but the medical reports all reference the same physiotherapy clinic, same handwriting on the assessment forms, just different doctor's signatures.
Liam possessed observational skills that exceeded his productivity metrics. Pattern recognition was valuable in compliance work, but excessive curiosity could complicate established processes. Sarah Hendricks' claim would be approved. The evidence supported payment, and the amounts fell within acceptable parameters. Her computer chimed with an Aegis notification. A small dialog box appeared in the lower right corner of her screen. Aegis integrity audit v2 anomalous correlation low. Pattern after-hours access external incident reports confidence. Action monitor Sebri.
23% confidence suggested preliminary data correlation. Aegis had identified some connection between her work patterns and external events, but lacked sufficient information for escalation. The system was learning, building profiles, establishing baseline behaviors for comparison. She closed the notification and returned to Sarah Hendrick's file. The claim met policy requirements for approval, regardless of Liam's suspicions about fraudulent networks.
Another text message, Aegis sees patterns, do you?
Someone was monitoring her digital environment in real time. The timing of the message, immediately after the Aegis notification, suggested either system access or physical surveillance of her workstation. Both possibilities required immediate investigation.
You all right? You look a bit pale. Fine, just processing complex cases. She deleted the message and opened her desk drawer. The hand sanitizer provided temporary ritual comfort. 3 pumps, methodical coverage, attention to detail. Cleanliness maintained order, and order prevented chaos.
The afternoon passed with mechanical efficiency. 17 cases processed, 12 approved, 5 rejected. Sarah Hendricks received her settlement. Liam asked 3 more questions about pattern recognition in fraudulent claims, each inquiry demonstrating dangerous levels of analytical thinking. At 5:30, she powered down her workstation and aligned her desk supplies with geometric precision. Liam was still working, struggling with a complex liability case that should have been straightforward for experienced analysts.
These medical reports don't make sense. The injury descriptions contradict the accident mechanics. Policy covers the claim, that's sufficient. But if it's fraudulent... Good evening, Liam.
She walked to the lift bank, maintaining her usual pace and expression. But her mind was already shifting from day protocols to evening requirements. Someone had connected her professional activities to external events with sufficient confidence to attempt blackmail. That connection needed severing before Aegis developed higher confidence levels. The lift descended toward the lobby, carrying her away from fluorescent order toward London's rain-soaked streets. Tonight's work would be different from her usual moral auditing. Tonight required defensive action. The anonymous contact had demonstrated system knowledge and surveillance capabilities, but they'd also revealed tactical weakness by initiating contact too early. Blackmail required leverage, and leverage required evidence. Evidence could be eliminated. People who possessed evidence could be eliminated. The ledger would balance, regardless of Aegis monitoring or Liam's inconvenient curiosity. As she stepped onto the street, her phone buzzed one final time. Car park level B2, midnight, come alone. The rain began to fall, washing the pavement clean. Chapter 3, The Moral Equation. Promise, Hanna confronts the gap between policy and justice, whilst Aegis tightens its surveillance net. The lift opened onto the 47th floor at precisely 8:47 a.m. Hanna stepped into the corridor's familiar geometry: beige carpet tiles, cream walls, motion sensor lighting that tracked movement with algorithmic precision. Her badge swiped against the department reader with a soft electronic chirp. Cubicle 47 waited in perfect order. Monitor aligned, keyboard centered, pen holder positioned at the regulation distance from her mousepad. She powered up her workstation and opened the case management system, ready to process another day's moral mathematics. But something had shifted overnight. Her inbox contained 47 new cases instead of the usual 35. The increase suggested either system error or deliberate case redistribution. Neither possibility aligned with standard operational procedures.
Morning, Hanna. Sleep well? He'd arrived early again, already deep into a complex liability assessment. His desk showed signs of extended work. Coffee ring stains, scattered documents, the chaotic arrangement of someone who prioritized results over order. Adequately.
His question carried undertones of concern rather than casual politeness. The previous evening's conversation about fraudulent patterns had established a connection she needed to monitor carefully. Liam's analytical mind posed risks to her compartmentalized existence. She opened her first case, Margaret Chen, age 67, claiming compensation for a fall outside Tesco Metro. The incident report described wet pavement, inadequate signage, resulting hip fracture requiring surgical intervention. Medical documentation appeared comprehensive: x-rays, surgical notes, rehabilitation schedules.
But the timestamps troubled her. Mrs. Chen had visited 3 different medical facilities within 6 hours of her alleged fall, each providing contradictory injury assessments. The pattern suggested coordination rather than coincidence.
That's interesting. I've got a similar case here. Elderly claimant, multiple medical opinions, very fast documentation turnaround. Coordination suggests organized fraud, or it suggests someone who knew exactly which doctors would provide the required documentation for a legitimate claim.
His interpretation revealed dangerous empathy. Liam saw victims where policy identified fraud patterns. This perspective threatened the mathematical purity that kept her world balanced. She reviewed Mrs. Chen's file again, applying Liam's interpretative lens. The woman lived alone in a council flat, survived on pension payments, had no history of fraudulent activity. The medical visits could indicate desperation rather than deception, an elderly person seeking help from any available source.
But policy was clear. Multiple medical consultations within 24 hours triggered automatic fraud investigation protocols. Mrs. Chen's claim required rejection regardless of individual circumstances. Annika Shah's extension. Hanna answered with regulation promptness.
Morning team meeting in conference room C, 5 minutes.
The conference room smelled of instant coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Annika stood beside a wall-mounted monitor displaying Aegis analytics, colored charts, correlation matrices, confidence percentages climbing steadily upward.
Aegis has identified several concerning patterns in our department's case handling. We're seeing unusual correlations between certain analysts' decisions and external incident reports.
The screen showed anonymized data points, but Hanna recognized her own decision patterns in the geometric arrangements. Aegis had progressed beyond simple monitoring to active pattern recognition.
Some analysts are showing statistically significant variations from department baselines. These variations require investigation to ensure compliance integrity. What kind of variations? Case approval rates that correlate with factors outside our standard assessment criteria.
Aegis had detected her night work's influence on day decisions. The system recognized that certain case rejections preceded external incident reports with statistical significance. Her moral auditing was creating digital fingerprints in the company's data ecosystem. After the meeting, she returned to Mrs. Chen's file with renewed focus. The claim met technical requirements for approval, but approving it would strengthen Aegis's correlation analysis. Rejecting it would maintain her statistical camouflage whilst denying compensation to someone who might genuinely need help.
You're approving the Chen case? She'd been staring at the screen for 7 minutes without realizing it. The documentation appears adequate? That's brilliant. I was worried we'd have to reject another legitimate claim because of bureaucratic paranoia.
His approval created unexpected warmth in her chest, a sensation she couldn't categorize or control. Liam's ethical framework operated from fundamentally different premises than her own, yet his satisfaction with her decision generated something resembling pleasure. An Aegis alert appeared immediately. Aegis Integrity Audit v. Medium. Pattern decision variance from his historical baseline. Confidence 47 cent. Action enhanced monitoring. The confidence level had doubled overnight. Aegis was learning faster than anticipated, building increasingly sophisticated models of her behavior patterns. The system recognized that approving Mrs. Chen's claim represented a statistical anomaly requiring closer scrutiny.
Everything all right? You've gone quite pale again. System notifications require attention. She closed the Aegis alert and opened her next case, but concentration proved impossible. The morning's decisions had created a feedback loop. Rejecting legitimate claims would maintain her cover whilst harming innocent people, but approving them would accelerate Aegis's investigation.
For the first time since establishing her night protocols, the mathematical elegance of her system showed cracks. Variables she hadn't anticipated were introducing chaos into carefully maintained order.
Someone would pay for this disruption. The anonymous contact who'd initiated surveillance. The system architects who designed Aegis to recognize patterns she'd worked years to perfect. anyone who threatened the balance she'd created.
Her phone buzzed with a new text. Aegis confidence climbing. Tonight's meeting isn't optional. She deleted the message and returned to her cases, maintaining perfect professional composure whilst planning the evening's necessary corrections. The ledger demanded balance, and balance required elimination of all variables that threatened her carefully constructed order. The rain had started again outside, drumming against the office windows with increasing intensity. Chapter 4. The evening's calculations required immediate attention. The surveillance van had been parked on Merchant Street for 3 hours when Hanna finally approached. Rain hammered the windscreen while she observed from the coffee shop doorway, cataloging details with professional precision. 2 occupants, thermal imaging equipment visible through partially tinted windows, direct sightline to her building's entrance.
Someone had escalated beyond digital monitoring to physical observation. The anonymous contact's warning proved accurate. Her statistical anomalies had triggered human intervention alongside Aegis's algorithmic scrutiny. She purchased a second coffee and walked past the van, noting registration details and equipment specifications. Professional-grade surveillance, likely private contractors rather than police. Corporate security conducting due diligence on employees flagged by their integrity systems.
The evening's target lived in Bermondsey, a 40-minute journey that would take her past 3 different CCTV clusters. Normally, she'd vary her route to avoid pattern recognition, but tonight required different tactics. If they were watching, she'd give them something worth documenting. The walk to London Bridge Station followed her usual path, maintaining consistent pace and posture. At the platform, she purchased a return ticket to Bermondsey using contactless payment, creating digital breadcrumbs for any investigation. The train journey provided 17 minutes to review Marcus Thornfield's file. Insurance fraud specialist turned serial claimant. 7 different policies across 3 years, each claim technically legitimate, but collectively forming a pattern of systematic exploitation. He'd cost the industry approximately £60,000 whilst manipulating loopholes designed to protect genuine victims. His elimination would restore balance whilst providing the surveillance team with documentary evidence of her movements. They'd follow her to Bermondsey, observe her walking through residential streets, then lose track when she varied her return route. Tomorrow's security briefing would conclude she'd visited someone in the area for personal reasons. Thornfield's flat occupied the 2nd floor of a converted Victorian house. Ground floor lights were on, but his windows remained dark. According to social media analysis, he typically returned from his local pub around 11:30 on Thursday evenings, providing a predictable window for intervention. She positioned herself in the bus shelter across the street, maintaining clear sightlines whilst appearing to wait for transport. The rain had intensified, creating natural cover for extended observation periods. Her mobile buzzed, target confirmed, proceeding as discussed. She hadn't sent that message. Her phone showed no outgoing texts in the past hour, yet someone was communicating using her number as identifier. Either her device had been compromised, or someone was spoofing her communications for surveillance purposes. The evening's surveillance wasn't random corporate security. Someone was orchestrating a controlled scenario, using her established patterns to create documentation for specific purposes. They knew about her night activities and were facilitating rather than preventing tonight's intervention. Thornfield appeared at 11:27, walking unsteadily from the direction of the Anchor pub. She waited until he'd entered the building before crossing the street, timing her approach to coincide with his expected arrival at his flat door. The building's entrance lock yielded to standard bypass techniques. She climbed the stairs silently, reaching the 2nd-floor landing as Thornfield fumbled with his keys. His intoxication level was higher than anticipated, an advantage for maintaining control during the conversation phase.
Who the fuck are you? Someone who's reviewed your insurance history, Mr. Thornfield. We need to discuss your claims patterns.
His flat reflected the chaos of someone living beyond legitimate means. Designer electronics, expensive furniture, artwork that suggested disposable income, inconsistent with his declared employment status. The evidence of systematic fraud surrounded them in material form.
You can't just break into someone's home. I'll call the police. Your 7 insurance claims totaling £59,437 represent systematic exploitation of safety net provisions designed for genuine victims. This requires correction.
His death would prevent future fraudulent claims whilst creating statistical closure for her investigation files. The moral mathematics remained elegant. One elimination preventing dozens of false claims that denied resources to legitimate victims. The intervention proceeded with clinical efficiency. Thornfield's intoxication eliminated effective resistance, allowing for controlled application of pressure to the carotid artery until consciousness ceased. Death followed within 3 minutes, a precise calculation that minimized suffering whilst ensuring permanent resolution. She arranged the scene to suggest accidental death during intoxicated stumbling. The expensive electronics remained untouched, eliminating robbery as motive. His final insurance claim would be denied posthumously, closing the statistical loop with mathematical precision. The return journey varied from her inbound route, taking her through Borough Market and across Tower Bridge. Any surveillance team would struggle to maintain visual contact through the market's maze of covered stalls and emergency exits. By the time she reached her building, she'd established reasonable doubt about her evening's activities. Her flat's security measures remained undisturbed, suggesting the surveillance focused on external movement rather than domestic invasion. She updated her encrypted files with Thornfield's case closure, maintaining the statistical records that justified each intervention. The evening's work had restored balance whilst providing her observers with carefully curated evidence of her movements. Tomorrow's investigation would find her traveling to Bermondsey for undetermined personal reasons, returning via circuitous route that suggested privacy concerns rather than criminal activity. But someone was orchestrating these scenarios with intimate knowledge of her methods and motivations. The anonymous contact, the surveillance team, the spoofed communications, all suggested coordination beyond random corporate security measures. Her phone buzzed with a final message: statistical correlation achieved, Phase 2 authorized. She deleted the text and prepared for sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring escalated scrutiny from both human observers and Aegis's algorithmic analysis. The system was learning faster than anticipated, but she demonstrated that human intuition could still outmaneuver digital surveillance. The ledger balanced perfectly, but the game's rules were changing in ways she hadn't anticipated. Chapter 5, The Human Variable, introduces moral complexity that threatens systematic order. Monday morning arrived with the precision Hanna required, but the variables multiplying around her desk suggested systemic disruption. Liam had positioned himself 3 cubicles closer over the weekend, ostensibly for better access to the shared printer, though his sightlines now included her monitor's reflection in the window. His proximity represented a data security risk that required immediate assessment and potential mitigation. Morning, Hanna. Liam's greeting carried the same warmth as Friday's departure, but his positioning allowed observation of her case files during screen transitions. Productive weekend?
I reviewed outstanding assessments for Monday's Q, standard preparation protocols.
She aligned her stapler with mathematical precision whilst evaluating his motivations. Corporate espionage remained possible, though his previous comments suggested ethical concerns rather than competitive intelligence gathering. Both scenarios required containment strategies. Her morning queue contained 12 new claims, but the 7th file triggered recognition patterns that disrupted her analytical rhythm. Margaret Henley, 67, claiming household contents theft following a break-in that allegedly occurred while she visited her dying sister in hospital. The documentation appeared legitimate: police report, hospital visitor logs, neighbor statements confirming her absence. Yet Aegis had flagged correlations between her address and 3 previous claims within a 2-mile radius, all involving similar circumstances and identical missing items. That's an interesting case. Liam's voice carried genuine concern rather than casual curiosity. Mrs. Henley's been calling our customer service line daily since filing. She sounds genuinely distressed about the delay.
Emotional investment doesn't validate claims accuracy. Statistical analysis indicates potential coordination with similar incidents. I've reviewed the supporting documentation. Her sister died 3 days after the alleged burglary. The hospital confirms she maintained bedside vigil for 72 hours straight. Unless she's hired accomplices, the timeline doesn't support fraud.
His analysis contained logical merit that disrupted her pattern recognition algorithms. The documentation supported his assessment, yet Aegis's correlation engine rarely produced false positives above 60% confidence levels. She accessed Mrs. Henley's full file, expanding beyond the claim summary to examine her complete insurance history. 12 years of continuous coverage, minimal claims, prompt premium payments. The profile suggested genuine policyholder behavior rather than systematic exploitation. The evidence supported Liam's assessment, creating cognitive dissonance between statistical correlation and human context. The system flags patterns for investigation, not automatic denial, she said, though the words felt unfamiliar in her mouth. Additional verification may be warranted.
Would you consider a joint assessment? I could handle the documentation review whilst you focus on the statistical analysis. Might provide broader perspective.
Collaboration represented a significant deviation from her established protocols. Yet his proposal offered opportunities to monitor his investigative methods whilst maintaining plausible cover for any irregularities he might uncover. Acceptable. Forward your preliminary findings by Thursday. The afternoon brought 3 cases that aligned perfectly with her evening requirements. Fraudulent claimants with established patterns of systematic exploitation. James Whitmore's 4th motor insurance claim in 18 months, each involving expensive repairs to his modified BMW. Sarah Chen's recurring business interruption claims that coincided suspiciously with planned renovations and holiday periods. David Mills's pattern of household theft claims that always occurred during convenient alibis. These cases provided clear moral mathematics, eliminating systematic fraudsters who denied resources to legitimate victims like Mrs. Henley. Her desk phone interrupted the statistical review with an internal call from Annika's extension.
Hanna, could you join me for a brief consultation? Room 7B when convenient.
Unscheduled meetings represented potential security breaches or performance evaluations. Either scenario required careful management to maintain operational security. Room 7B contained Annika and a tablet displaying what appeared to be Aegis correlation reports. The AI's interface showed connectivity patterns between multiple case files, with Hanna's assessments highlighted in amber warning colors.
Aegis has identified some interesting patterns in your recent case closures. High accuracy rates, but also increased correlation with external incidents that might suggest information leakage.
The system was mapping connections between her daytime assessments and the subsequent elimination of fraudulent claimants. The correlation engine was learning faster than anticipated.
External incidents, police reports, missing persons, statistical anomalies that Aegis flags for potential security review. Annika's tone remained neutral, but her positioning suggested prepared talking points rather than casual conversation. Nothing actionable yet, but the AI recommends increased monitoring protocols for high-performing analysts.
The corporate system was implementing countermeasures against her evening activities without understanding their moral necessity. Aegis viewed her interventions as security threats rather than statistical corrections.
I'm committed to maintaining information security standards. What monitoring protocols does Aegis recommend? Enhanced access logging, periodic workstation audits, collaboration requirements on sensitive cases. Annika's smile carried administrative warmth that didn't reach her eyes. Starting with the Henley assessment, I understand Liam's providing additional perspective.
They were implementing containment strategies disguised as productivity improvements. Liam's collaboration wasn't coincidental. He was positioned as an unwitting monitor for her decision-making processes. The return to her cubicle felt different now, with Aegis's surveillance algorithms actively cataloging her every keystroke and screen transition. The system that had previously enabled her work was transforming into a containment mechanism. But the evening's requirements remained unchanged. 3 fraudulent claimants required correction, and Mrs. Henley's legitimate case demanded protection from statistical denial. The moral mathematics hadn't altered, only the complexity of execution had increased. She would adapt her methods to accommodate enhanced surveillance whilst maintaining the essential work of restoring balance to a corrupted system. Her workstation powered down at precisely 17:30, but the game's parameters had fundamentally shifted. Tonight's interventions would need to account for algorithmic observation and human witnesses who didn't understand the necessity of her corrections. The ledger still required balancing, but the calculations had become significantly more complex. Chapter 6. Irregular Behavioral Cluster. Promise. Hanna's perfect facade intensifies under surveillance while her night work grows dangerously bold. The rain against her flat's windows created statistical white noise that masked the sound of methodical preparation. Hanna arranged 3 manila folders on her kitchen table, each containing printed case files that Aegis couldn't monitor through offline documents.
Enhanced surveillance required, enhanced precision. Every digital footprint now fed directly into correlation engines designed to map her activities against external incidents. The solution was analog methodology. Handwritten notes, printed photographs, cash transactions that left no electronic traces. The first folder contained Marcus Webb's insurance history, 7 vehicle claims in 3 years, each incident occurring during periods of documented financial stress. The pattern suggested systematic fraud rather than statistical misfortune. His latest claim involved a BMW allegedly stolen from a secured car park that had no CCTV coverage.
Webb's evening routine included visits to the Crown and Anchor, where he conducted what appeared to be coordination meetings with other frequent claimants. The pub's location provided multiple exit routes and minimal surveillance coverage, optimal for unobserved intervention. The second folder documented Sarah Chen's business interruption claims spanning 18 months. Each incident coincided with convenient alibis and resulted in payouts that exceeded legitimate operational losses. Her pattern suggested coordination with the renovation companies that provided damage assessments. Chen's fraudulent claims had delayed legitimate business interruption payments to 3 small companies, including a family bakery that had subsequently closed permanently. The statistical theft was measurable and destroyed livelihoods and eliminated employment opportunities. Her mobile displayed Liam's number at 2100 hours, an unusual communication time that suggested urgency or personal motivation rather than professional requirement.
Hanna, sorry to call so late, but I've been reviewing the Henley case file. There's something odd about the denial algorithm.
Personal contact outside office hours represented potential security complications. Liam's investigation into case processing might uncover systematic patterns that Aegis was already monitoring.
Odd. The denial codes don't match standard risk assessment protocols. It's like someone manually adjusted the parameters to ensure rejection. And it's not just Henley. I found similar patterns in 17 other legitimate claims from the past month.
His analytical skills were identifying the systematic denial structure that protected fraudulent claimants whilst rejecting legitimate cases. The moral inversion was becoming visible to external observation.
Manual adjustments might reflect senior management directives. Risk mitigation strategies sometimes require policy modifications. But these aren't risk mitigation patterns. They're profit protection schemes. We're systematically denying legitimate claims to maintain quarterly targets whilst paying out obvious fraud cases. It's completely backwards.
Liam was approaching the same conclusions that had initiated her evening interventions. His moral clarity represented both validation and operational threat. He might expose the system before she could complete the necessary corrections.
Complex systems often produce counterintuitive results. Perhaps we should discuss this during office hours when we can access the full documentation.
The call terminated, but Liam's investigation represented an accelerating timeline. His discovery of systematic claim manipulation would eventually lead to broader questions about external correlations and statistical anomalies that Aegis was already mapping. Tonight's interventions couldn't wait for optimal conditions. Webb, Chen, and the third target required immediate correction before Liam's investigation attracted additional scrutiny that might compromise operational security. The third folder contained James Morrison's disability claim history, progressive conditions that mysteriously improved during surveillance periods, then deteriorated conveniently before medical assessments. His fraudulent claims had consumed resources that delayed legitimate disability payments by an average of 6 weeks. Morrison's pattern included evening fitness activities that contradicted his claimed mobility limitations. His routine involved a private gym where surveillance was minimal and intervention could appear accidental rather than targeted. 22:30 provided optimal timing for the first intervention. Webb's departure from the Crown and Anchor followed predictable patterns that created a 15-minute window between the pub's CCTV coverage and his residential area's security monitoring. She dressed in dark clothing that absorbed rather than reflected ambient light, carried cash rather than cards that created transaction records, and selected tools that would appear coincidental rather than premeditated if discovered. The rain provided additional operational advantages: reduced pedestrian traffic, impaired visibility for potential witnesses, and environmental noise that masked approach sounds. Weather patterns had become tactical assets in maintaining statistical balance. Webb's route from the pub to his flat included a poorly lit underpass that connected the commercial district to residential housing. The location provided natural isolation whilst maintaining plausible deniability for chance encounters between strangers. His fraudulent claims had stolen approximately £47,000 from legitimate claimants over 3 years. The mathematical theft was quantifiable, measurable, and morally unambiguous. Correction was both necessary and justified. The intervention required 7 minutes of direct contact to ensure statistical finality. Webb's surprise at encountering another pedestrian in the underpass transformed into recognition of systematic correction before operational completion. One fraudulent claimant eliminated, statistical theft discontinued, resources redirected to legitimate claims processing. The return journey avoided CCTV clusters whilst maintaining normal pedestrian patterns. Webb's absence would be reported within 12 hours, but the investigation would focus on his known associates at the Crown and Anchor rather than random stranger encounters. Her flat's computer automatically synchronized with Aegis monitoring protocols upon activation. The system would log her evening online activity as consistent with normal domestic internet usage, streaming services, social media, routine email processing. Enhanced surveillance required enhanced misdirection. Digital alibis could be manufactured through automated systems, whilst analog interventions proceeded undetected by electronic monitoring. Tomorrow would bring increased scrutiny from both Aegis correlation engines and Liam's manual investigation. But tonight had restored statistical balance through the elimination of one systematic fraudster. The ledger showed measurable improvement. Legitimate claims processing would accelerate by removing Webb's resource consumption, whilst his fraudulent pattern could no longer contaminate statistical models. 2 interventions remained to complete the evening's corrections, but the enhanced surveillance parameters had been successfully navigated without compromising operational security. The moral mathematics remained unchanged. Only the complexity of execution had evolved to accommodate systematic observation. Chapter 7. Liam discovers Hanna's encrypted files while Aegis escalates to active surveillance mode. The morning brought Liam's familiar knock. 3 soft raps that had become routine over the past fortnight. Hanna opened her door to find him holding 2 coffee cups and wearing an expression she couldn't immediately categorize. "Thought you might need caffeine," he said, extending 1 cup. "You looked exhausted yesterday." His observation suggested visible fatigue despite her careful grooming routine. The previous evening's interventions had required extended operational periods that compressed sleep schedules below optimal levels. "Thank you." She accepted the coffee and stepped aside. "Though I maintain consistent sleep patterns."
Consistent doesn't always mean sufficient. He settled onto her sofa with practiced ease, as if her flat had become an extension of his own space. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about the Morrison case."
The 3rd target from last evening's corrections. His file remained active on her desk, awaiting final documentation updates. "What specifically?" she asked, maintaining neutral inflection. "The pattern matching you mentioned. How Aegis flags inconsistencies." He pulled out his tablet, fingers moving across the screen with purposeful navigation. "I ran some correlation analyses on recent claim denials. The results are interesting." Liam's independent analysis represented an uncontrolled variable. His investigation could identify patterns that compromised operational security or revealed statistical corrections she'd implemented. "Look at this." He turned the screen toward her. 37 claims denied in the past 6 months, all flagged by Aegis for behavioral inconsistencies. But when I cross-referenced with subsequent incident reports, the tablet displayed a spreadsheet with color-coded entries: green for approved claims, red for denials, and a new category in amber: denied claims where the claimant had subsequently died or disappeared. 12 amber entries, 12 statistical corrections that Liam had inadvertently documented. 12 people, he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. All denied legitimate claims, all dead within weeks of the denial. That's not coincidence, Hanna. That's systematic. His analysis had identified the correlation between claim denials and subsequent mortality events. The pattern was visible when examined through statistical methodology rather than individual case review. Correlation isn't causation, she said carefully. Denied claimants may engage in riskier behaviors due to financial stress. Desperation creates poor decision-making that increases mortality probability.
Or someone's killing them. He leaned forward, tablet forgotten. Think about it. 12 people who challenged the system, all eliminated before they could appeal or seek legal representation. It's corporate assassination disguised as statistical anomaly.
His hypothesis was simultaneously correct and completely wrong. The systematic element was accurate, but his assumption about corporate involvement revealed fundamental misunderstanding of the operational structure. Her phone buzzed with an Aegis notification. She glanced at the screen, maintaining conversational engagement whilst processing the system alert. Aegis Integrity Anomalous Correlation. Hi, user Wren H. Patel L. Pattern Collaborative Investigation detected. Recommendation: Enhanced Monitoring Protocol. Status: Active Surveillance initiated to stir. Aegis had detected their collaboration and elevated monitoring to active surveillance. The system was no longer passively collecting data. It was actively watching for real-time anomalies. Hanna? Liam's voice pulled her attention back to the immediate conversation. You've gone pale. What's wrong? She showed him the notification. His expression shifted from concern to confusion, then to something approaching fear. Active surveillance, he read aloud. What does that mean exactly? Aegis has identified our discussion as potentially threatening to corporate security. It will now monitor all our communications, access patterns, and behavioral metrics in real time, rather than through batch processing. Because we're investigating claim patterns. Because we're investigating claim patterns that correlate with mortality events. She set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. The system interprets pattern recognition as potential whistleblowing activity.
Then we need to be more careful. Use encrypted channels, meet off-site, avoid digital trails. He was already reaching for his tablet again. I can set up secure communication protocols. Liam. Her voice carried enough authority to stop his rapid planning. What exactly do you intend to accomplish with this investigation?
The question hung between them like a bridge that could only be crossed once. His answer would determine whether he remained a manageable variable or became a threat requiring correction. Justice, he said simply. These people deserved their claims. They died because someone decided their lives were worth less than corporate profit margins. That's not acceptable. His motivation was ethical rather than personal. He sought systematic correction through legal channels rather than direct intervention. The approach was inefficient, but not actively harmful to statistical balance. And if your investigation succeeds, if you prove systematic denial of legitimate claims,
then the responsible parties face consequences. Criminal charges, regulatory sanctions, media exposure. The system gets corrected through proper channels.
Another Aegis alert appeared on her phone, this time accompanied by a soft chime that indicated priority messaging. Behavioral cluster analysis complete. Subjects Wren H. Risk assessment elevated. Recommendation: physical interview scheduled. Timeline 48 hours. Compliance mandatory 48 hours. The system had moved beyond passive monitoring to active intervention. Physical interviews meant direct questioning about their collaboration, their investigation, and their conclusions about claim patterns. We have 2 days, she said, showing him the second notification. Liam read the message twice before responding. 2 days before what? Before Aegis requests formal interviews about our anomalous collaboration. Before the system decides whether we represent a threat to operational integrity. 2 days to complete the statistical corrections that would restore balance to the claim processing system. 2 days before enhanced scrutiny made future interventions impossible. The moral mathematics remained unchanged, but the timeline had accelerated dramatically. Justice required completion of the remaining corrections before Aegis could interfere with necessary statistical adjustments. "Hanna," Liam said softly, "what aren't you telling me?" Outside her window, rain began pattering against the glass with gentle persistence, as if the weather itself recognized the approaching convergence of systematic forces that would soon require final resolution. Chapter 8. Chapter Promise. Hanna accepts that exposure is inevitable and begins planning her final statistical correction. The rain intensified through the night, drumming against her flat's windows with mathematical precision. Each droplet followed gravitational laws, predictable trajectories that could be calculated and anticipated. Unlike human behavior, which required constant correction to maintain proper statistical balance, 48 hours until physical interviews. Aegis had moved beyond correlation analysis to active intervention protocols. The system's escalation pattern followed standard threat assessment procedures: identify anomalies, monitor behavior, request clarification, implement containment measures. She sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, reviewing the final entries in her personal spreadsheet. 7 cases remained unresolved. 7 statistical imbalances that required correction before enhanced scrutiny made future interventions impossible. The resolved cases.xls file displayed her work with clinical precision. Client ID 28 Malcolm Henley. Insurance fraud £127,000 Client ID 3901 Patricia Voss. False disability claims £89,500 Client ID 4556 David Chen. Identity fraud £156,800 Resolved 2903. 37 entries total, each representing a successful correction to the statistical imbalance created by fraudulent claims. The monetary values were irrelevant. What mattered was the restoration of proper ratios between legitimate need and systematic response. Liam's investigation had identified genuine victims whose claims were denied. His ethical framework interpreted this as corporate malfeasance requiring legal intervention. But he failed to understand the broader mathematical reality. Legitimate claims denied created negative statistical pressure that required positive corrections elsewhere. The fraudsters she corrected had stolen resources that belonged to genuine claimants. Their elimination restored balance to the system by removing artificial drain on available funds. Simple mathematical equilibrium. She opened a new document and began calculating optimal correction sequences for the remaining 7 cases. Time constraints required efficient planning. Each intervention needed to occur within specific windows to avoid correlation with her known location patterns. Priority targets. Final correction phase. Target Alpha, Yash Rebecca Morrison, Cubicle 23. Multiple false medical claims totaling £94,000. Home address Bermondsey. Routine. Yoga class Tuesday evenings. Returns via Rotherhithe Tunnel. Target Baydard. External claims adjuster. Systematic approval of fraudulent construction damage claims. Estimated impact £340,000. Home address Canary Wharf. Routine. Late office hours. Walks through Jubilee Park.
Morrison's elimination would require precision timing. The tunnel approach offered controlled environment with minimal surveillance coverage. Crawford presented greater complexity due to his Canary Wharf location, extensive CCTV network, higher security presence, but predictable movement patterns. Her phone buzzed with another Aegis notification. Surveillance update, Wren, H. Anomalous activity detected, extended evening sessions, cross-reference, external database correlation status, active monitoring.
The system was learning. Her extended evening sessions in the office, cross-referenced with external databases, had triggered additional scrutiny. Soon, Aegis would correlate her badge access patterns with temporal clusters around mortality events. A text message from Liam. "Can we meet tomorrow?" Found something important in the encrypted files. He had accessed her resolved cases.xls file. His investigation had led him to her personal documentation of statistical corrections. Within hours, he would understand the true nature of her evening activities. She typed her response: "Tomorrow evening, my flat, 7 p.m. 24 hours to complete the essential corrections." Morrison and Crawford represented the highest value targets. Their elimination would restore significant statistical balance before Aegis interviews began. The remaining 5 could wait. Their impact was marginal compared to these primary corrections. She closed the laptop and moved to her bedroom wardrobe, retrieving the leather portfolio that contained her correction tools. Each implement was precisely maintained, cleaned, and organized according to specific protocols. The small digital scale for measuring precise dosages. The collection of pharmaceutical compounds acquired through careful sourcing. The latex gloves, always purchased with cash from different locations. Orsin first. Tuesday evening yoga class ended at 8:30 p.m. She would exit through the studio's rear entrance and walk the familiar route to Rotherhithe Tunnel. Minimal foot traffic after 9 p.m. No CCTV coverage in the tunnel's central section. Correction could be completed within a controlled time frame. Crawford would require different methodology. His Canary Wharf location demanded subtlety rather than isolation. The compound that mimicked cardiac arrest symptoms would be optimal. Rapid action, minimal detection window, easily attributed to work-related stress. She secured the portfolio and returned to her kitchen table. The rain continued its steady percussion against the windows, providing white noise that helped clarify her thoughts. By tomorrow evening, when Liam arrived to discuss his important discovery, the most critical statistical imbalances would be resolved. He would bring evidence of her corrections, expecting shock and condemnation. Instead, he would find logical explanation of necessary mathematical adjustments. The system required balance. Fraud created imbalance. She provided correction. His ethical framework would prevent him from understanding this simple reality. He would interpret her work as criminal activity rather than systematic maintenance. His response would be predictable: moral outrage, threats of exposure, demands for cessation of correction activities, which would leave her with one remaining statistical imbalance to resolve before Aegis interviews began. The most complex correction of all, requiring careful consideration of optimal methodology and timing. She opened her laptop once more and created a new entry in the spreadsheet. Target final, Liam Patel, threat to statistical correction protocol, correction required, 48 hours. The equation was elegant in its simplicity. His investigation threatened the continuation of necessary corrections. His elimination would restore operational security and allow future statistical maintenance to proceed without interference. Outside, the rain intensified to a steady downpour, washing the London streets clean in preparation for tomorrow's necessary work. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, ring the bell, and tell your friends about my listening library.